Madam Mayor, it is 9:04 and we are live.
Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Welcome to the January 3rd meeting of agenda meeting of the City of Lake Worth Beach. Can I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sarah Maliga.
Present.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy is not here. Commissioner Mimi May.
I'm here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Present.
Oh, we have two present now. It's
Whatever I say, he does the opposite.
Someday I would say, can't you see me? Okay, so good morning, everyone. And I see that we have staff here. William is here, which is great. And perhaps we should start with staff in case they're busy as well. So William, do you want to, Jamie, why don't you sort of take a lead on this one?
Okay, so obviously you wanted to start doing these meetings to discuss the upcoming agenda, which would be the January 7th meeting. So we have both Tiana and William and myself and Troy on here. So I didn't know if there were particular items for Tuesday or Thursday next week that you guys wanted to discuss, but we do have staff available should you guys have questions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I looked at what we have to fairly, don't bite me, but I think it looks like a fairly light agenda so far. We've gone over I was looking, does anybody else have any specific questions, let's say for William, involving the ordinance changes? Okay, just to recall, the lot size is only for the west side of Dixie Highway, not for the west side of the city, if there was any question on that. And the assisted living, it's a change to allow Madison Green to be done. William, is there anything else that we should know about? Where's William?
My camera's working because I'm at home, but Jamie mentioned that it was both discussion of the 7th and the 9th. I would respectfully ask we postpone the vacation rental discussion that is scheduled for the 9th until we have some time to meet with each of you individually. The direction coming from y'all was not overly definitively clear or consensus, and there have been questions raised by the public as to what has staff brought back specifically in regards to ordinance language to address the issue. Well, if we address all the issues that we raised in the legal white paper, it would be a very exhaustive legal exercise and staff intensive, and we really haven't had time to do that. So I would respectfully ask that we be allowed to meet with each of you and get your individual feedback on what areas you would like us to specifically study in terms of short-term rentals and whether you'd like to allow them or not, and bring it back so we can have a more concrete and productive discussion at a later date.
Okay, one of the things that, obviously we're limited in what we can do, apparently. And you've got the Boynton Beach, I'm sorry, ordinance, and we have a Wellington ordinance to go by. Maybe I'm going to mute myself and carry on. I got to get this dog.
I didn't hear her, dog. I don't have a problem postponing it and talking individually about it. I don't know that there's been any changes from our last conversation that would help us to make a final decision.
Right. What if you did a proposed ordinance that sort of morphed ones that have recently been done, William, and have something specific for us to go over? How do y'all feel about that?
I think what he's saying, though, I think what he's saying, though, Mayor, is that he would like to do that, but he wants to have more direction from us and not do it on Thursday.
No, I know, I realize that. I agree with that.
Okay.
That's no problem. Yeah. No, it's when we do the one-on-one, come to us with a draft.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of where I'm trying to avoid preparing draft language for all the areas that are mentioned, both from Wellington, South Beach, our white paper. I feel there's consensus not to do certain areas that are proposed in the white paper prepared by Christy and I. One being, are we going to allow, if we allow short-term rentals, will we allow them to still be homestead exempted? That's on the white paper as yes or no, and I don't have any direction on that. Will we charge commercial utility rates? Both of those require an extensive amount of ordinance change. And there are 5 different chapters in the Code of Ordinances that may need changes depending on what direction that you give us. Other things are a little bit more easy, like just changing the permitted use table to say they're allowed everywhere if you decide you want to move forward with allowing them. That's how it will work. They'll be aware. We can do some regulations regarding noise and parking, and that's not a huge burdensome amount of work in terms of legal or staff time. But it would be nice to narrow the focus down because there's a lot on the plate right now. And I'd like to try to avoid spending legal and staff time on writing ordinance language of which you have no interest in hearing in the first place.
Well, then instead of an ordinance, a draft ordinance, perhaps this a bullet list of, or you just listed a lot of different issues. And if you had a bullet list that each one went over one-on-one with you, that we're all speaking the same, that we address all of those points, that would be helpful to have an organized list for us to go over. Mimi?
Well, then I think that we should have a one-on-one meeting with each of you and go over the white paper that was prepared, I think, 4 years ago, because it's all bulleted in that.
I was going to recommend the week of the 13th, which is the week after next. I can have William in. I'll get with his schedule and I'll have him on each of our one-on-ones that week.
Okay.
So that's the
Mimi?
week after next.
And Jamie, could we also possibly have somebody from PBSO? Because one of the issues that we faced, even though we don't really regulate them now, is that there seems to be quite a bit of confusion and consternation from our citizenry as to who they call about enforcement of things, specifically the noise and the parking, which seems to be the 2 biggest issues that people have regarding the short-term rentals that we have in existence now. Parking on the street and noise are both enforced by PBSO. Staff can't do much about that. And so we try, but those are 2 areas that are regulated in other areas and are have had some success in helping manage the vacation rentals. But for it to be successful, there's going to have to be a very high level of cooperation and consistency between the city and PBSO.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pull you into my next one-on-one with Captain Carr, Lieutenant Lavinia.
So to make it official, do I have consensus? Is there consensus to postpone next Thursday's special meeting?
Well,
No, not the whole meeting.
Not the whole thing. There's 2 items on it.
Oh, okay. William, you want to address the second item?
The other item is finishing the DCS overview, Department of Community Sustainability overview. And we have 2 more divisions to go over with you all. One is Business License Division, and the other one is the Strategic Planning and Urban Design Division, which basically encompasses economic development and housing and some other areas. So we can do that on Thursday if you'd like.
I'm for it. Anybody else?
Yeah. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, I call you. Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that I really want us to talk about on Thursday, which is kind of implied in the agenda, but isn't exactly written, is putting out an RFP for a company to go over the code.
Well,
so,
I think that would, yeah.
But that isn't, I don't believe that that's in the, on the agenda. So I want to make sure that we talk about that. And then
I would, that probably should be an additional item under.
I've asked for it to be additional item, and it was told to me that we didn't need an additional item, that it was implied. So if it needs to be an additional item, can we add that on? Jamie?
I think if it needs to be, yes, but.
Yes, we can do a separate item, or it can be part of that item, but we can have that.
Well, Jamie, really, I believe somebody in Glenn's office, the city attorney's office, I've never done an overall code, code overhaul. I participated in a partial one, but it would be a behoove, I think, everybody to have a good understanding from a legal office, what other cities may have done it recently, and I can't think of one, but it will be a multi-year effort since there are 23 chapters. And some I don't know who was going to be the attorney, or we were even going to have one on Thursday, but it would be good to have some insight from the city attorney's office on that.
I agree with you, William. I'll be there Thursday, and if you want to, it's implied, but if Commissioner May's point, if you wanted to simply add that, Melissa wants to add that as an item of discussion of possible RFP for rewriting the code, at least it's clear out there to the world that that's going to be discussed. And William, right, it's a long process, but every process begins with one step.
That, and we don't have to do the chapters in order, do we?
No.
I think the land use, zone, that's this.
And I believe some of those are RFQs too, Glenn, if I'm not mistaken.
It'll be an RFQ.
Right.
And what I think that is probably the best thing is to have a review by independent party to give you some indication of where we have major conflicts, where it hasn't kept up with Florida statute, where deleted because they're not relevant anymore, and then other areas, and then work with you to prioritize which chapters we first.
That, and we need to make sure that they're enforceable.
Yeah, well, yes.
Well, you laugh, but it's important.
I know, it's the common theme. How do we
He's been
enforce
at it
stuff?
for a long time, Mimi. I think that's a good idea, and yeah, whatever we need to do to keep that going. I would also do, and you're gonna hate this idea, but I think, we all hear, I'm sure you do too, many, this about what about that? Well, I would, if a citizen wants to point out, because it's a big job, right? So if citizens have, wait, this, I know this one, I had an experience with this one, could you look at this one? I think we should be open to input from the citizens, just if they've had a specific problem with an area of the code, whether it's, misunderstood. I just think we should get some public input on that.
Yeah, my experience when you've had consultants come in and redo codes like this, the consultant will pretty much lead that kind of process, working with William's department in our office, and probably workshop meetings where citizens.
Right, but I mean, I'm sure our citizens, everyone who has had some experience with a problem they can offer their suggestions anytime. So yeah. And how long?
And I just made one more comment, I'm sorry. But remember, the Code of Ordinances affects every single department in the city. It's not just a community sustainability issue. And like, just as an example, one area, I don't believe we have a complete operating ordinance for the electric utility, which needs to be addressed. There's issues that relate to the city clerk's office, not, that they're not doing a great job. They are. It's just the enforcement of certain things, codifications of things. PBSO will need to be involved, as well as Palm Beach, the fire rescue, because ordinances affect. So I would like the public to be aware that it's not just my department. It's going to be a huge group effort of everybody.
We weren't picking on you, William. It's just one that your department is one that people have a lot of interaction with. That's the only reason I said it. And we found some, inconsistency there. So we'll talk about it on Thursday. I think one of the things that's going to be help us to have that conversation is if anybody has any idea of how much it costs to do this and how long it takes. And maybe Glenn has some input into that. I don't.
And we also did put some money in the budget, I believe, to start the process. So whatever, we can get it started. And I think you're right, William. I think it is kind of a daunting, overwhelming task, but it like Glenn said, we'll just start somewhere and we'll, see where it goes, but we can't keep putting it off.
I think there was a time where things weren't even being codified for a couple of years back. I could be wrong about that. So, okay, we have consensus to what?
I was going to say, I don't believe that's true.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Melissa, before you ever arrived here, we were holding off codification because of the expense under Susan Stanton's administration. We were only doing codifications twice a year, and it was a nightmare for people. And this is before the new Muni Code. And it took us a while to catch up. And our biggest issue with codification, which isn't a city clerk issue, is that it does say anything in conflict and is repealed. Well, we never go through the ordinances and pick out all the things where we have things in conflict. We just go with the latest adopted ordinance, which has presented some challenges for people. And it is difficult to do that. But hopefully this clear out would get rid of all those extraneous ordinances that have been adopted or are out there for years and years and have been rendered inapplicable or inappropriate because of later ordinance adoptions. That's our biggest problem.
So, Madam Mayor, to be clear, I'm going to remove the short-term rental item from September, from January 9th. And I'm going to add a discussion item regarding an RFQ to examine the city's code.
That sounds like good to me. Anybody?
Okay, so I will do that after this meeting and
Okay,
send out a revised agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that certainly simplifies Thursday. Okay, unfinished business. We have the two, the subletting of the lease. Now, in terms of the two, William, the public hearings that we have, we went over these. The one is, like I said earlier, it's the west side of Dixie
Right.
Highway. Why did that, it says first reading. What happened? Did we not do it last time?
Because
Did
of
we
the
both-
changes to the ordinance and how much you deleted out of it, we had to go back to a first reading. It also affects believe the permitted use table, so it had to go back and restart as a first reading versus a second reading.
Okay, and that use table is still so neat. Anybody have any questions about that one?
No, I think
Anybody? Okay, anybody have any questions about the next one, which is the facility rules? Oh yeah, this is our facilities. This is a new one. Oh, second reading, it's not that new. Anybody have any questions about that?
the trespassing.
Yeah. My only suggestion, it's second reading, so we're not suggesting change, but I think we should be really aware about with this whole new thing about posting. I think we have to be very, very clear about when the parks are open, so that people that we can't say, I didn't know that. So that's just an aside that I think that we should really pay attention to. I've heard things, there's no smoking signs, things like that. But I just think our posting of the public places, now that we are going to be taking a different spin on this whole being in the park after hours thing, we should be very clear about what those hours are. Anybody else have any discussion? Comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I actually brought this forward to Jamie and Troy about 2 months ago. Because right now, a lot of the signs in the parks say park hours are sunrise to sunset. And then we turn the lights on and kids are out there playing basketball and people are at the park and it's dark outside. So if we can figure out how to make it more clear so people realize that it's not sunrise. I mean, I don't know how to change language. I brought this forward to Jamie and to figure out how we can do it to make sure that we're being as clear and as transparent as possible. But it gives a mixed message when they say that the parks are closed, but yet we're turning on the lights after dark. So I don't know if Jamie got anywhere with that or if Mr. Perry was able to figure out which way we're going to go with that.
Do we just turn off the light? Tiana? Miss McKay?
So, good morning, everyone. Tian McKay, Director of Leisure Services. Vice Mayor's staff is internally doing an assessment and gathering all of the sign information and working on providing you with an update on the sign language. We are doing an inventory of all the signs in the parks, and we will be able to follow up with Mr. Perry after. So we're currently, that's undergoing right now.
So good to hear that. So good to hear that.
I was looking yesterday at some of the ones like in Wellington, which are pretty similar to ours, say like dawn to dusk.
Yes,
oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Tiana, I'm sorry.
I actually was during the break doing some inventory of some signs, and Wellington was one of the signs that I brought to my team. So we are gathering the information and looking at that and comparing.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to have things happen without us having to do it. Okay.
Ronaldo has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Ronaldo.
Thank you. Sorry I missed a bit of the start of the meeting because my computer decided to not recognize its own speakers or something. I think this pre-agenda meeting maybe not be the best spot to have this conversation, but I will point out, like, I definitely have a lot of questions, or there's definitely a lot of desire to talk about this issue. Like one specifically, the addition of the unlicensed vending. Well, like what license are we talking about? I feel like it's just lacking specifics, and there's a little bit of a vagueness into some of it. And on top of that, a lot of it seems to be duplicative to criminal law. So I'm just not sure how useful it is. I know originally it was intended to be in response to that law that was passed, but I just have some issues with how it's written currently.
What, do you have a line for that, Ronaldo?
Yeah, let me pull it back up. It's line sorry, I have to use my phone now. Like line 157. It literally just says subsection 10.
Yeah, okay.
Unlicensed vending, period. Like what license are we talking about? Are we talking about somebody giving out food that doesn't have food safe certification? Are we talking
Yeah.
about unofficial permitting? Are we talking like licensing on our licenses in terms of like business license and city permission, or are we talking about state licenses, state certifications? I mean, I feel like there's just a lot here that it's lacking detail and it seems pretty vague and honestly not totally necessary.
I think
Well,
it's all of the above.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree, Ronaldo.
So do I.
You know,
I think it would be all license necessary for whatever the occupation is.
whether it's state or
I mean,
local.
my gym, I have to have a Department of Agriculture license. I mean, whatever license you are required to have by the state and the county, I think needs to be said.
Okay, and I have maybe a question for legal. If somebody wanted to organize a parade in town, do we need to get like what kind of licensing or permitting is needed for that?
If it's not vending, that's not vending. This is
Right.
unlicensed vending.
But
so
that, I mean, that's an open question. If it could,
vending is, selling things.
yeah, it could also be a fundraiser, right? It could also be
That's not
giving out
vending.
things or
That's
event.
different. No, that's
Well,
different.
maybe to help a little bit, this is William, and I'm going to interject, but on like the food vending, the city's code compliance division does not have much authority to deal with that if it's happening on the right of way. Again, it's under PBSO. Also, the licensure that they may have to have as a food vendor would come from the Department of Health, possibly the Department of Agriculture, which we don't have any grounds to enforce. And so in sort of splitting the baby or playing the devil's advocate, we do need some clarity on who we expect to enforce or cite the people that fall under the proposed ordinance.
Well, William, if someone sees a lady selling food out of her truck on a city street, is that something that code doesn't look at?
But we see it and we'll turn it into PBSO, but we don't have any authority to cite that person. We can't cite anything happening in the right of way.
Thank you,
Code
William.
compliance is property driven, or people undertaking activities on a property that in order to create a nuisance or are outside the realm of their business license. But
this
code
specific
compliance
code,
doesn't have the ability to do parking tickets, citations for activities in the right of way, even including the sidewalk. And that's part of the confusion that code compliance is seen as an all enforcer, but it's not. Much of it falls under PBSO, and it's probably a lot more than they can handle.
but
Well,
this,
then we
this ordinance itself is only talking about the exterior of city-owned properties.
Right. Right. That's what I was about to jump in on. This isn't a citywide ordinance. This is just dealing with the first part, the interior, and this part, exterior.
Exterior of city-owned property. We're not going, and although we should be at some point talking about that. Right now, this is simply just on city property. Although I think we should talk about the streets and everything else, but for this ordinance, we're talking about city property. And I worry, Ronaldo, that we have an issue of somebody getting sick. Well, where did you buy it? I bought it at the Hatch. Who owns the Hatch parking lot? The city. Boom. That's what I worry about. Plus, we say that we're banning food trucks, but we're allowing food trunks.
And I have to agree, because the backup that it causes, the traffic that gets backed up onto Lake Avenue is a safety hazard. And PBSO, if Captain Carn was here, they can attest to how many times they've gone out and they've written warnings, and a lot of the people just don't care. They take the warning, chuck it.
It seems like we need to have a very sound conversation with PBSO about priorities. You know, I understand that the ladies selling, I understand that they serve a purpose in the community, but there are people that pay for licenses, pay rent, do it right. And maybe that we should take that into consideration. And I think the health issue is something else. So, and I've had quite a few complaints about the food vendors. It's become much more prevalent, I think. So in terms of that language, where are you at, Ronaldo, unlicensed vendors in the park?
So as William pointed out, though, I mean, this rule basically would take us to the inside of a sidewalk. So if you're going to use Hatch as an example, so if somebody meets someone there to sell whatever out of, you know, we can say, oh, you can't do that, you're in our parking lot. So all they have to do is walk to the sidewalk, or forbid, you know, or God forbid, they walk towards the railroad tracks, and that is not on us. We don't have the jurisdiction to enforce that. So the concern is basically how practical and how effective is this going to be accomplishing the goal that we're setting out? And if we are concerned about things like food safety and whatnot, once again, that jurisdiction lies, I believe, pretty much entirely on Department of Health.
Are you saying, are you sort of saying that you don't think we should have any issues about the ladies selling food out of their cars, that we should just let it go? It's a question.
I mean, I think a better way of phrasing that question is if people are trying to survive and sell tamales out of their trunk and, you know, we're singling them out, there's an issue there. But we do have other events that happen throughout the city where people are serving food, and even in sometimes I see posted drinking and whatnot, and none of that has the proper certification. So like, are we going to go all across the board, and how far are we going to take it? Because I think the issue is I haven't really necessarily received or seen any of these complaints that are being addressed. I mean, I do see the activity happening for sure, but I wonder how this is going to impact other things. Like, one of the more common things that happens is if you've ever sold anything, you know, online. I bought a guitar off of Facebook Marketplace from somebody yesterday, and a lot of those instances, the safe thing to do is to meet someplace public for that transaction, because I don't want somebody coming to my house, and I'm sure they don't want me coming to their house just in case. So one of the fallback things is, hey, let's meet somewhere public and visible, just in
meet at a
case.
McDonald's, it's private. We're just talking here about city property.
Yes.
And I think you are smart enough to understand the difference between someone having every day their spot where they are vending and meet me in the parking lot and we'll buy a guitar. I think that's kind of a tortured.
I'm definitely smart enough to know what's going on. So like I said, I think this will be appropriate conversation at the meeting.
Okay. And which, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sarah. Thank you.
You know, unfortunately, there's a person, and I won't say his name on here because it would put him out in the public, but a local who lives in Royal Point, Siena, called PBSO in regards to the 7 vendors that were set up right down his street, and he couldn't even get to his house. And when the police showed up, they came to his house to take a statement, and the next morning, all of his windows in his car were busted out. And that retaliation is not acceptable. I don't care who you are, what you're trying to do. I grew up poor. I know what it's like to try to struggle, but it's also not fair to the vendors who are paying to serve food, and they're doing it lawfully, and they're employing people, and they're following the program, like the guy who owns Tropical Market at the corner. It's not fair to Mike when he's trying to sell the same food and he's doing it right to have 6 cars set up a block down the street that are cutting his nose off spite his face. And lawful is lawful is lawful. And unfortunately, and you know, we can say whatever we want, but I am personally wanting to move this city into being more lawful across the board. And it needs to be equitable for everybody. It's not fair to single certain people out and say, well, we're going to let you get away with it because of. It's not acceptable. And I don't care what kind of retaliation I get or what kind of emails I get. We have to play by the rules and make sure everyone's playing by the rules, because it's not fair to the business owners who are. And it's not fair that people who are just residents and citizens who are tired of it have retaliation and all their windows busted out on their car the next morning. Not cool.
Well, there's criminal law to address that, which would, I think, be more appropriate. If somebody was to vandalize property, I think it's more appropriate to exercise the stronger law, which would be criminal, which is kind of the point, but.
Which also requires a lot of
Criminal
proof.
is
If
operating a
somebody's
business
breaking
without
in their
license.
windows in the
Criminal is
middle of
also,
the night.
criminal is also operating a business without a license. Because now you're not paying sales tax. Now you're not paying your taxes to the commercial licensing. That's stealing. That's unlawful.
Okay, so as far as, I mean, apparently there's going to be more discussion about this, but I don't see taking it out. I think we're talking about city property, and thank you for your comments, but Arnaldo, I can't really, I understand where you're coming from, but I really can't agree with letting people just have carte blanche to do that. Anything else on any of these ordinances? Because I have something I'd like to bring up about code. All right, seeing none. William, is the current for policy that code only works on complaints?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part. Only on what?
Complaint, if someone files a complaint.
No, we do proactive. The inspections for business licenses is basically proactive. We have not done any global like block sweeps or neighborhood sweeps, but we are open to it in collaboration with the neighborhood associations. Yolanda Robinson, our co-compliance assistant director, has gone to several of those. We've not been asked to do that, but we are open to doing it. But I would say that probably maybe 60% of our activity is based on complaints, and the other is proactive, what we see out on the street every day. I can get a better number from Ms. Simmons and Ms. Robinson and get it back to you, but I would conjecture that's what it was. The complaint-driven activity was a far higher number when you could do anonymous complaints.
Because I mean, so I'm going to start with one thing and but follow up, because oftentimes driving through the city, as we all do, we see things that are flagrant, code things, and wonder, do we have to call in that, or do we have to make a complaint? Why is the city not doing something about it? But I'm also going to back that up with the fact that, and Troy had pointed this out, when you see something that is a code violation, even if you call it in, it's not a situation where code can go to the house and go, take that mattress off your front yard. It's a process, which is very frustrating because it looks like nothing's being done. Mimi, I see your hands up. Let me turn to you.
Sorry, yeah, no, you can continue. I wanted to get a little bit of clarification on William. What's the difference between doing a neighborhood sweep and when the code officer is driving in their district and they see something, opening up a case on it?
Well, the code officer seeing something might be individualized. They may see other things close by to where they see that issue. When we've done code sweeps in the past for a neighborhood, we've collectively brought together the whole code team to help, because it could be a lot of, one thing is the volume of work. There's work associated with actually opening and managing a code compliance case. And we do not have the staff to carry an active code case on every instance where there is an active code problem. We would probably have to have, I don't think any city has a 100% violation notice rate where every violation that ever existed is always noted and case brought forward. But where we've done it in the past, we've done, in working with PBSO and the neighborhood association, illegal parking on the rights of way, trash and dumping. The last one I think that we did may have been in the southwest area of the city, and we just went through the whole neighborhood sweep for curb appeal. Where do people have issues with landscaping maintenance or general building maintenance? Where were there trash and debris or dumping? Where were there cars parked that shouldn't be parked? It's been several years since we've done that, but we have, like I said, we try to have close collaboration with the neighborhood associations, and we do encourage every neighborhood association to sort of have a representative. that can funnel the priorities, because the priorities for one neighborhood may not be the same for another one. And then we can collaborate with them to address the broad brush violations that are the priorities for that neighborhood within that neighborhood's prior boundaries.
What about the use of
Versus
citations?
Pardon me?
We use, I think, what about I think citations are often a very much more effective way of just, if for an easily fixed.
It can be, if you can get a person to actually serve the citation to. If you see dumping on a vacant lot, there's no person to actually cite with the citation. We have to do a formal.
You can't send a citation to the owner?
They have to sign for it and they have to provide identification as to who they are. So we can't do the citation. It ends up being a traditional notice of violation. And we do a lot of courtesy notices, and that's, left at a door that is a property that is inhabited. And we get a lot of compliance through that, but the citations do have to be served upon a person.
And one last thing, I had brought this up about how are we using, number one, we've passed the ordinance where there has to be someone available for calling for any rental license. Are we gathering that information? And what are we doing with it once we gather it?
Well, we have it, and we have a database associated with each business license that has a field for their email, their local contact. If there's not a field, a novel line to put it, we put it under the miscellaneous notes or special information. A lot of it you will not be able to see if you do click to gov and go on that way. You'll have to call our office if you're interested in knowing. And some of it's available to the public and some of it's not, because it's redacted. It's, their driver's license information, that sort of thing. But our compliance rate for having that information has grown exponentially over the past few years as we've had a little bit more consistency of staff at the front desk. And so when people come in to renew their licenses, the biggest gap was the long-term licenses that had not provided that information. And we've been going through systematically, calling those people, hey, did you recall that when you renew your license, you need to provide this information? It's now required by the city, and we're getting there. We don't have 100% compliance on all business licenses, but we are ticking away at that. Okay,
because I brought it up and we've never resolved it, and I'm not asking to resolve it this morning, but I think we need to think about who has access to that information. Is that, it's public record, but if it's on a weekend and there's a terrible problem that, nobody's going to, hi, I need the name of this guy in your file.
Right.
So I want to ask, all of us to think about, should there just be a list? You look up an address and there's the name and phone number. No, nothing else. The name of the responsible person and the phone number so that they can be called in the middle of the night if that happens. I think we should make that more useful information, but I'm deferring to, that's just something to talk about or think about. So any other questions, comments regarding this agenda? The Benny's lease thing, I don't even know why we're calling it a sublease. I don't see it as a sublease, but can we talk about that? Because anytime you see and I think some of the feedback we've gotten last time was, the word waiver, that we're waiving something. It sounds like we're giving something away, and I'd like if we could possibly, what are we waiving?
I will defer this to our city attorney, because I know Glenn has been working back and forth with Benny's attorney, kind of laying this all out. And I explained in the one-on-ones exactly what this is, what the business owner up there is trying to do. But Glenn, I know you were speaking yesterday.
Okay. So this is different than Benny's lease at the pier. This is Benny's Oceanside, where he inherited Mulligan's lease, and those leases predate all of us. They're done, a long time ago, and whether it's Mamma Mia's or Benny's, they have different clauses and different requirements. And so if, in this case, there's a paragraph that says, if you're, and I'm trying to find the exact words, but it doesn't just use a simple sublease. If you're using space to some other person, so, Lee is going to have 400 square feet that a sushi place is taking complete responsibility for. They're going to be serving sushi there, their own chefs, their own wait staff, their own everything. And then whatever arrangements they make in terms of profit after they repay everything. So, Lee and I and his lawyer talked a lot about this, and it's back to that old saying, a rose is a rose no matter what you call it, and this is you call it a sublease, you call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, there's a third party who's going to be set up there. And those old leases require that if that's happening, then if there's any quote profit, because you wouldn't want, I think 15 years ago, whoever was putting this together must have been thinking that if you rent a space for me and I sublease it to somebody else at double the rent, that's the traditional thing. I rent the space for $1,000 a month, and I'm renting it now to Mayor Betty for $2,000 a month. Well, the city, the ultimate landlord, should get that increased rent. That was the theory. I don't think anybody ever contemplated that somebody would be taking 400 square feet, which is maybe 10% of the space, and saying, okay, here's a little pop-up restaurant essentially that's going to be there. And whenever there's been an assignment or a sublease before, whether it was when Kilwins was sold, or whether Mulligan's was originally transferred from one company to another, the city has traditionally just waived, either explicitly or implicitly, this provision. And that's why we put on the agenda. We thought it was something that had happened several times in the past, not just with this site, but also, as I said, with Mamma Mia's, I think it happened, and it also happened with Kilwins. It's just waiving that profit. How do you determine the profit is always a complex situation. And from conversation with Lee and his lawyer, it's clear this is not going to be any profit at this for at least a year because of the amount of build out that's going on, an expense that Lee's incurring. So we initially just put it on as this is what we've done before. It's a waiver of that quote right the city has to profit, which is problematic to kind of calculate and figure anyway. We're still getting the same amount of rent for that space. I mean, Jamie and I did back of the envelope math, and that 400 square feet is basically $1,400, $1,500 a month. Lee's already paying the city for that as part of the overall lease. So, one theory is, why should he have to pay any more? Why should anybody have to pay any more for the exact same space they're already paying for? And then we have this troublesome clause. And so we talked about, should there be some incremental increase in rent? And that's always the option that you all have. But again, from our standpoint, we just put in what we've always had for the last 3 or 4 times, which is a waiver of that provision, and just let the process move forward. And it shouldn't have any impact. It's the same 100 square feet still being used as a restaurant, whether it's a sushi restaurant or whether it's a hot dog stand, it's still being used as a restaurant. So that's the overview.
We're getting tight on time, so I'm going to call on Ronaldo and then Mimi. So let's keep an eye on the time. Mimi's got to leave at 10.
Mine was very informational, just for curiosity. I mean, so this sushi section, if you will, they're still considered a tenant, even if they're, the sushi vendor itself, it's under the same license and everything as Benny's. But they're still considered a tenant, because my original question was this even mentioned? But you just gave my original question was this even necessary to add to the lease? But you gave a really good explanation, Glenn, otherwise, because it's nothing changes. I mean, a commercial lease, generally you sign the lease and it's like, okay, it's your property, build all the counters you want inside the square footage.
Let's try to be a little business friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, the conversation we have. So I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. If Lee was, for example, to hire his own sushi chef, there would be no problem.
Exactly.
But instead, there's this chain, this other restaurant out there, and I've heard. I'm not a sushi eater, but I've heard that there's these high-end sushi places that they go in, and it's so much per person, $100, $200 a person, to have this 20-course sushi meal, and it's something different than I would think a normal Benny's type restaurant could say, oh, I'm going to do this high-end sushi. So, I think if it's successful, it's not only great for Benny's, it's great for the city, because it's going to be driving more traffic to our location. But that's not for me to say, that's for you all to say. So we're just suggesting that you waive it like you've always done. As far as Jamie, Christy, and I, we all went back in our memory banks and couldn't think of a time when the city increased rent because of this kind of a situation.
We just increased his rent. Anyway, Mimi, Miss May.
Yes, thank you. And I don't have to leave right at 10.
And I see Sarah's light up.
I'm glad that there was clarification on this, because when I first read it, it was very confusing in the fact that, the lease was saying one thing and we were waiving it. And I think that when we get to that word waive, the residents and, they think, well, why are we giving something away? But then when you really look at what's happening, like Reynaldo said, he's not changing anything. He's just serving sushi and using a sushi master to do it. So for me, I have no problem waiving any section of this. But I am glad that we were listened to and there was clarification. And, I actually spoke with Lee to really understand what was going on. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their diligence on this when we did have questions.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have not spoken with Lee because obviously everyone knows I've been out sick. But I think that anything that we can do to help our businesses stay in business and be successful is a no-brainer, as long as he's not doing anything unlawful. One thing I do want to make sure that I have clarification on, does this other entity have to get a separate business license to operate, or would they be operating under Lee's license and insurance?
I think I'm going to defer to William on whether they need their own BTR. I tend to think they would, but in terms of their relationship, they have their own agreement, their own management agreement between Lee and this other company as to who's responsible for what. The new company is responsible for pretty much everything in that 400 square feet. Serving food, cleaning up.
So utilities, they're obviously going to figure that out between the two of them. But as far as licensing, I just want to make sure there's clarification, so there's no, them getting along the work plan and then all of a sudden they find out, oh shoot, we were supposed to do this. So I just want to make sure that they have clarification on what they need to do.
I'll double check that. Again, I'll speak to William and Lee's lawyer again in terms of the sushi place needing their own BTR. But again, I'm going to defer to William, and I think they probably do.
William's hand is up.
William?
Okay. It can be done one of two ways. It either can be done as an accessory use to the principal use, where it's just listed under, let's say, Lee's primary business license, and it would be a separate BTR, or depending on how their arrangement is, it might require its own independent business license, which would constitute the three parts: the BTR, business tax receipt, the use and occupancy inspection, and the use and occupancy certificate. Based on what, and I haven't seen how this is going to be set up, and we'll make that determination when we see it. But if they're in a specific space of a specific footage within the tenant space, they're likely going to have their own independent business license.
Thank you. I was thinking the same thing, William. I agree.
Can we make sure that Lee and this other entity have this in writing, that they know these two options in writing?
Yeah, I'll talk to Lee, because Lee's lawyer and I talk almost every day now, Joel. So we'll talk this through, and then I'll probably just shoot him an email confirming what we talked about.
Okay. Okay, we're getting really tight on time now. Does anybody have anything to bring up that wasn't on the agenda for this coming week that we can talk about in 6 minutes?
I heard nothing but great things about the parade, and I just want to say thank you to all the staff. And I heard that you guys had an amazing time, that the parade was extremely successful. And this is from some people who are usually very critical. So I just want to say congratulations to staff, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to see it for myself.
Mm-hmm. Great. I see Ms. Coyne had her hand up.
Yeah, there were a couple of things. First of all, with great sadness, the Lake Worth Herald announced that this week's issue is their last issue. Yeah. They're unfortunately closing. And that brings up the public noticing, because I know for my department, and probably Williams, depending on what the ad is, almost all of our advertising is in the Herald. And the Post is significantly more expensive. So I wanted to bring up doing what a lot of cities do, which is they have online public notices. They're on the website of the county in which the municipality is located. It's done through, the one that I'm interested in is done through Civic Plus. They already do our agendas. They're going to be doing our public record software. They're very reliable. They're actually one of the best companies I've ever worked with regarding being responsive. The cost is $6,000 annually, and that's for the entire city. So it wouldn't be like $6,000 for the clerk's office, $6,000 for community sustainability. It's searchable. I've seen it on Broward County. So there would be a link on our website to link to the county website, and we would have our own page. Also, people who are interested in certain topics can subscribe to whatever their particular interest is. So it's pretty amazing. I would recommend we do that because otherwise it's going to be astronomical to advertise all our ads in the Post.
Does that, obviously, I'm assuming it satisfies the statutory requirement.
100%, yes.
Ronaldo?
Does that 6,000 include, is there like a limit to publication? Is it six? It's six. Okay. And I'm guessing this is a little time sensitive because we need notice requirements. So I would definitely recommend that we get this on agenda ASAP.
Well, we'll keep in mind, because of the cost, it's not something that would have to come to commission.
Right, it's
That's true.
$6,000.
It's 6,000.
It's
Yeah.
under $7,000, but I mean, the cost savings alone, because
Yeah.
William's always posting a lot of things as well. So we'd save a good deal of money.
And we
And
didn't
it's-
obviously want to do this because we didn't want to take away supporting the Lake Worth Herald, but now that's a moot point. So all I would need is consensus, and we will get this done as soon as we can.
I think you got it.
vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good deal.
Okay.
Mr. Waters?
Commissioners, one point of clarification is that when we have large development applications or significant ordinances, we do have provision in the schedule of fees and charges that the actual cost of the advertising is passed on to the applicant. And in those cases, we likely will go ahead and do a Palm Beach Post advertising because it gets to a broader, maybe a wider audience outside of just the city. But I am totally supportive of what Melissa wants to do. We've talked about it, for the past couple of years, and I'm so happy she found this system that she's talking about. We might have requirements of post advertising for large projects that may be desirous of more public scrutiny or notice.
And if
But
it's
the cost
passed
will be
on
passed
to
on to the developer.
right. I don't see a
And
problem.
the city clerk's office does publish all election ads in the Post as well, and in El Latino, and that will continue, but it will also be online. So thank you for the consensus for that. The next thing I wanted to bring up was my reading of public comment that's submitted online. So as you know, I think our last meeting automatically adjourned at 11.
Right.
Which would not have happened had I not had to read all those comments. Now they are, as soon as they're submitted online, I do get a notification. I look them over and then they're approved and posted on the website. They're not taken down. So they're always, as soon as so they could submit a comment for March now and it would still be up there or be up there in perpetuity. We're the only city I know of that even allows online comments to be submitted. I would like to request that I no longer read them since they are available for anyone to see them in the interest of not having to end meetings without getting through all the business.
I have a comment on that.
Mimi?
I think, sorry, that's okay. I think that it's important that we acknowledge that we have seen them. So I agree with you that they do not need to be read. But I think like a question at the beginning, even when you're doing roll call or something, you could say, Commissioner May, do you acknowledge that you have seen and read the comments online? Commissioner,
I read them before the meeting every time.
Right, but I'm saying I'd like to have it in the minutes and on record that yes, we acknowledge and have read them, because I want the people that put them in to be assured that we are reading them and we are taking them with just as much clout as the people that have come into the meetings, because I don't think there's a difference between I have to feed my kids at 6 o'clock, but I'm interested in commenting, and the person who can come in at 6 o'clock and comment. But I absolutely agree that they do not need to be read out loud.
Ronaldo?
I think another good compromise would be, especially when there's times where we have like 100 comments, the online form, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I know it says for, against, so that sort of thing. This would be harder for non-agenda and consent, but when it has the for and against, if we have like an issue and it's 100 different comments, maybe a good thing. And so if we don't want to read 10 comments, something could be said about like, 64 and 40 against, like just a quick summary. Hey, we received this many written comments and this is the breakdown of what it was. Like just a way of acknowledging.
I think we can do that ourselves if we wanted to, just like we can take a tally when people are talking in the meeting, because I sometimes do that.
And the form, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the blue card, it's for or against.
Right.
I don't know if the online
It might not be on it.
option.
But,
does it?
Which of that?
Madam Mayor, you can for, against, decided, or NA.
On the website.
On the website, on the online.
Yeah.
But
I like Mimi's idea about disclosing, because I believe we should read them, and I do. I mean, up until 5:30, I'm reading comments.
But and for the for and against and either maybe that could be a column, because when on the reader online, that's not I don't believe that's one of the columns, or you can kind of sort it as like, these are the people for and these are the people against. But just a thought, I felt like that would be a good way of acknowledging, especially when we have some of the more popular issues.
Do they check off, Melissa? Because when I read them, I just see the comments. I don't see a column that says for or against, unless I'm missing it.
Yes, they do, and I'll make sure that that's, I think each person who views the online comments can choose what information to see. Like everything's sort of broken out into different columns, like on a spreadsheet. So that's like an individual choice. So you can make sure that you activate that column so that you could see it. You may not want to see their city necessarily or their phone number, but I don't think actually they give their phone numbers, their email. But I'll check on that and get back to you about that.
Along the same lines, quite a few people said to me, why are we letting people that don't live in the city make comments and have them read? But that's if we're not going to read them, I guess it doesn't matter. So I like Ms. May's idea about acknowledging that we've done it, because it's very important. You take the time, and that I read them. I read every one and respond sometimes to them.
But I think if Melissa was going to read them to us, then we don't have to read them before. However, if we are not going to have them read, then it would be appropriate for us to read them and acknowledge.
Yeah, I like to know ahead of time what people are thinking, but if we're not going to read them, then yes, it's incumbent on us to read them.
Correct.
Right.
And acknowledge it publicly that we have read them.
Okay.
So is there consensus for that?
I was just going to ask the same question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there consensus for that?
Yes.
And when would that start?
Tuesday.
Well, right now there is no public comment for the meeting on the 7th. Maybe we start it with the 21st to give people time because we have to change the wording on the website where the public comment is, and to say that public comment will no longer be read.
Right.
But everyone that shows up can come to the podium and say their statement.
100%. And there are often times when people submit comments online and then they show up in public. So I have to sort of keep in mind, like pay attention, obviously, because I'm not going to read their online comment if they've commented. You only get one shot, one comment per item.
Okay. All right. Well, I know that children are about to pounce on Miss May.
What are you talking
not
about?
today.
No,
That's true. Wow. Good for you. So anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Is Jamie still here?
Yeah. His hands up.
Jamie, you want to bring up?
Oh, Jamie's hands up.
Oh,
I
okay.
can see it.
Oh, go ahead, Melissa, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, if you want to say something about the backup, that's the last thing I have on my list.
Okay, go ahead.
About the
I don't think
backup.
anyone,
What we
Refresh my
talked
memory.
about yesterday about backup for the agendas. So what, okay, so I don't see Jamie. Oh, yeah, I
I'm
see
here.
Jamie. Do you want to talk?
he doesn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you said backup for the agenda.
Yeah, what we talked about yesterday about the timeliness, like sometimes
Oh, okay. Yeah, you were talking about contracts and stuff. Yeah, so this came up last week. So there are times like this is a perfect example right now, the Benny's thing. You know, yesterday I was going back and forth with Glenn. He's obviously talking to the attorney and to Lee and everything. So we would have the original agreement or the contract or whatever the document is attached to the actual item itself. Obviously, if we made a change to that, we would then have to swap out that document, and we're within that time frame of when we would have had to have everything posted. So the question is, if we're working on a contract and we don't have the final contract complete by that Friday when we're going to be, like for the 21st meeting, Melissa, it's next Friday, correct? The 10th? Do we have to push the information out, publish the agenda?
correct.
So if we have a contract on for January 21st, and we have to publish that agenda on next Friday, the 10th, if we only have the draft of that contract on the 10th, is it okay to attach that to the agenda item, knowing that probably on the 13th or 14th, we would swap that out with the final version once we have the signatures of things? Or do we just say, you know what, until we get the final version, we'll just have to push that to the very next commission meeting, which would be like the first meeting in February. That's what, unless it was something that was time sensitive, because we've run into that situation multiple times.
Anyone? All of a sudden, a hush has fallen over the crowd.
Or I guess the bigger question is everyone still okay with that time frame of what is that? 12 days, 13 days, whatever that time frame is, Melissa?
It's 11 days. So the items are due to be added to the agenda 18 days before the meeting. The backup's due 15 days, and the agenda is published 11 days before the meeting.
So if we have a draft, if we have a contract that's been talked about, the draft is on the agenda, and a change happens in between that time and the time of the meeting, is that your question, Jamie?
Yes. Yeah. Are we able to do that, or would you guys want to stick strictly to that time frame? And again, before we had a much shorter time frame for adding items, we've had a longer time frame. Obviously, that was set under a previous commission. I didn't know if you guys are okay with this, if you need more time to view those items, if you need less time. We should really need to talk about how you guys want to do this, or just keep it the same.
Here, my response is, if we get a draft, one of the things that about the notice and the long time frame is notice to people that this is coming up. This is something we're going to be talking about and possibly voting on. So if we have a draft, which is essentially close to the finished product, and there's no remarkable changes, then I'm okay with it. I think that I would like to trust staff to say that if a draft is submitted to us and then a big change came, you would bring that to us and go, listen, we got to postpone this because it didn't work out, or whatever. How do people feel about that?
I think as long as the basis of the contract isn't completely rewritten. If it's one or two small, like you said, Mayor, small tweaks that aren't going to be impacted by, does the community need to be able to have a conversation about this and have input? I'm okay with it.
And that's what we've been doing, because you still have the staff report as well and all the backup documentation. Just that final version might not be there yet. But again, we just want to make sure that that's okay. You guys are okay with the time frame.
As long if it's a big change, let us know. And if you can let us know by an email what minor changes happen, so we don't have to spend time at the public meeting, that we all know about it at the time, that would be helpful.
And also indicate on the backup that it is a draft.
It should be right.
We did talk about that. Melissa would put draft on
subject to
so that, especially, for us, but also for You know, because there are people that are literally sitting at their computers waiting for this to drop. And they're going to read it before we do sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to know that it is a draft so that we don't get the panicked phone calls.
Well, we should print across diagonally. Don't we do that draft anyway?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yep, ma'am.
another suggestion would be on the staff report, if it is a draft agreement, it would say draft agreement, final agreement will be provided before the meeting.
Right.
And then what I generally do is if things have changed, I do email all of you.
Oh, yeah, you do.
So I would email you with, if it were, you know, letting you know what the changes are, and then we would see about if it needed to be changed or, you know, like pulled or not.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your questions, your input. Anything else anybody's got? It's very sad about the Herald. We're gonna have a proclamation, I think, on the second meeting because we just didn't have enough time to prepare a good thing. And I don't know, you know, so other than that,
And the only other thing I was going to mention is I don't have any other than the update I sent all of you yesterday as far as the beach, the town of Palm Beach and the renourishment and everything. I have not received any updates since the email I sent you yesterday afternoon. But obviously, as I get information or hear anything else, I will keep everyone informed.
so we're not sure yet if the conversations between Palm Beach and Lantana have been productive.
They'll be calling the manager down there in about an hour here.
Okay.
And having that conversation. But yeah, as far as the conversation from the town, though, I have not heard anything else.
Interesting email from the town of Palm Beach. Let's just say that. Let's leave it at that. All right. Anybody have anything else except let's have a great weekend and I don't even know what day it is, but this crazy Wednesday to Wednesday, people are like not knowing what day it was. It's Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. On Sunday afternoon at 2:00 at the Art League on Lucerne Avenue, the Artists' Eye is having an opening of local artists, and they always have a nice opening, and that group needs support. The Art League needs support. I'm trying to help them find a new place to live because their rent is going up exponentially, and so I don't know what we're going to do about them. That'd be great. That would be great use, for example, for the annex. I think if we need to talk about the annex. So other than that, does anybody have anything? Such a quiet crowd this morning. We're all starting up the year quietly. So I guess that's it. No one else has anything to say, and I'm going to stop talking.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. See you all Tuesday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.